Hi, good afternoon. My name is Pedro Felipe Alfaro, and today I'll be discussing my history paper, which I wrote for History 408, U.S. Foreign Relations from Independence to World War II, which is directed by Professor David Gosen. My paper is titled Woodrow Wilson and the Quest for National Self-Determination. So, first off, what drove me to this topic? I have a fascination with Woodrow Wilson and his efforts to push for internationalism, but also do it in a foreign policy that seemed honest. So that's why I'm interested in him and his role in World War I. And I'm also interested in the 14 points as a document for formulating foreign policy. And so I what I want about my research is that I first narrow it down in that I knew I wanted to write about the 14 points, but I needed to choose something within the 14 points that was interesting and could lead to original research. And so I decided on self determination just because I was familiar with the concept before and I thought it would be interesting. And so the way that I decided to go about my research is that my research question was a comparison between how the concept of self determination was applied in Europe and how it was applied in the non European context, or for a lack of a better words, how it wasn't applied. Um, and so I thought this comparison would be really powerful. And the way I went about my research is that I borrowed four books from the library that gave me some general ideas on Woodrow Wilson, his 14 points, and national self determination. And from there, I researched more specific journal articles and primary sources that could help back up my arguments. And so the main two sources that I used were Derek Heather's National Self Determination, Woodrow Wilson, and his legacy, which helped guide my research, especially when speaking of Woodrow Wilson, his negotiations in for the Treaty of Versailles, and the other main source that I used was Aaron Manella's Wilsonian Moments, Self Determination, and the International Ordinance of Anti-Colonial Nationalism, which is a fairly recent book. It was written in 2007, and that was one of the main sources that I used for my research in self determination in a non European context. And so some of my main findings, or the main two findings, were first in a European context. My research found some of the limitations that Woodrow Wilson found when trying to apply self determination in Europe, which was not only the colonial interests, not only the interests of the imperial European powers, which they already have plans in how Europe will be divided through secret treaties, such as the Treaty of London with Italy, but also how hard it was to apply the concept in the ground. In that operationally, applying self determination proved a lot harder than Wilson initially thought. But throughout the negotiations, he was pragmatic, and so that resulted in self determination being a success. But I would argue a limited success in Europe, just because of the limitations that he faced, and the political realities after World War I. The other important part of my research was in the non-European context, in that although Woodrow Wilson did not support nationalist movements outside of Europe directly, um, and so historians argue, some say this is because of his racist views, others say because he was too concerned with European affairs and he had a lot on his plate. Ultimately, he did not extend self determination outside of Europe. But either way, as Manella finds, his words and rhetoric inspire a wave of nationalist movements that believed in his ideals, and although they were disillusioned because he would not support them, and when they tried to meet with him, he did not meet with certain nationalist leaders. Either way, his arguments and the rhetoric of self determination gave them a justification, and it helped give them a sort of ideological weapon. This is not to say that Woodrow Wilson is responsible for these movements, but we have to understand the link between them two. And ultimately, I find that my research is interesting. It's original research, And although there's a lot on the subject, and therefore my paper doesn't cover everything, I think it addresses some interesting points, especially when we try to do a comparison between the two cases, the case of Europe and the case of the non-European context. Thank you.